Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. My guest today is another remarkable woman. Barbara Glickstein identifies herself as a public health nurse executive, a health policy expert, and a broadcast journalist. But I think of her as an innovator, an educator, and a tireless advocate. And I mean that, but you don't look tired at all.
Well, thank you so
Welcome.
much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So you're a health reporter now.
That's
you
right.
like doing that.
I do, because as a public health nurse, I see that my community, particularly being very much a New Yorker and an urban person, that my radio work is my public health practice.
It's so great because you're reaching all these people.
Yes, and we have an opportunity to have a conversation about health, and stories are the best way for people to tell their story and find out about health.
And you've been doing this for 25 years?
25 years on WBAI, Pacifica Radio.
That's so great. What day are you on?
Fridays from 1 to 2 p.m. with
Good.
my colleague and co-host, Diana Mason, who's also a nurse. And we just love it, love the opportunity to be on the air.
And you're a reporter, aren't you, also on radio with Martha Stewart?
Yes, I periodically report on Living Today on the Martha Stewart Sirius Satellite radio station. Just was on the air last week talking about H1N1 and virus. And
so what do you think about it?
Well, I hope everyone's feeling well who's listening today and taking good care of themselves. As a public health nurse, I'm all about prevention. Got off the subway, came to your studio, washed my hands. First thing, can't tell everybody enough about washing their hands. Right. Taking good care of yourself. I think we all can do things to build our immune system. We can talk about that if you want. And cover your mouth if you're on the subway or on a public bus or outside. Use your crook of your elbow. Really good, Ronnie. And that I think deciding whether or not to have the H1N1 vaccination, although I must say that the Centers for Disease Control and the New York City Department of Health and many people are recommending it. My recommendation is to read all that you can, talk to your healthcare provider, your nurse practitioner, your primary care doctor, and see whether or not you're someone who should be getting that vaccination. It's a tough decision. I know you've been following this, and everyone has a lot of complaints and concerns and fears. But I think it is an individual decision. There are things to be concerned about regarding it. As you may know, New York State nurses have they didn't want it to be mandatory, and they won that injunction, and it has been stopped. It's now under discussion, and I think in a few days we'll know
it's so
what that
interesting
decision
that they didn't
is.
want it, so it's not it makes it a little confusing for people like us, right?
It does.
But I was so interested in the center that you formed at Beth Israel Hospital. You were a co-founder?
That's right.
And a co-director.
That's right.
Tell us about it.
Well, the Continuum Center for Health and Healing is part of Beth Israel Medical Center and Continuum Hospital-wide, which is St. Luke's Roosevelt and Roosevelt Hospital, Long Island College Hospital. And it was really built on the incredible work of others that were brave enough now, which doesn't seem that long ago, but 15 years ago, when people were beginning to talk about, as a New York institution that sees so many people from indigenous and ethnic backgrounds that see health and healing in a very different way than Western allopathic medicine. And we began to have those conversations about Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, homeopathy, massage, chiropractic, and although nutrition has been referred to as alternative medicine, you and I know it is primary to everyone's health. And I worked originally with Dr. Betsy McGregor, who is a pediatrician, and through the program called Humanistic Healthcare, which brought together people and brought people from outside talking about it. It's now a full running center with some wonderful medical doctors who refer to themselves as integrative medicine, and nurses, as well as chiropractors and massage therapists, acupuncturists, providing a evidence-based care. Really, people seem very happy being at the center. I'm no longer there full-time, but a big proponent of their work and of the clinicians there.
Do you go there for primary care?
Yes.
Just generally? I mean, it's
yes,
like going to a family doctor.
Exactly. We have wonderful family medicine docs. Those are primarily our physician care. There are 2 internists there as well. and a referral system to other practitioners outside of the center. But many of our young families are there who want to first, use food first, which is our big philosophy. Take care of yourself, manage your life stress. Another big thing when we talk about building immune strength, we're all stressed. Stress is part of life. It's how we're dealing with it, and also knowing when to say, I need just 2 minutes. I'm going to go over there for just 2 minutes, and I'm going to take a couple of breaths, and I'm going to recheck in with myself, remember who I am, what it is that I'm about, and then go and have that conversation with my coworker or that patient.
So it's a nice, quiet,
it is quiet. It's a beautiful space that was built out sustainable and green, as much as one could in a pre-existing commercial building on 28th and 5th. And people walk in and say, I already feel good just being here. And that's what we wanted. We wanted a space where people would feel that sense of calm and healing. And I think we've been successful.
That's great. What's the address? 245
Fifth Avenue, and the website, which has a tremendous wealth of information on it, built by their medical librarian and informatics specialist, Marsha Handel, and it's www.healthandhealingny.org. That's HEALTHAND, healingny.org.
That's great. So you left there to do what?
I wanted to do journalism full time. I'm also proud to have been doing radio for 25 years, but my interest was to do it full time. And I've been able to do more writing. I was privileged to be accepted as a fellow, although we try not to use that term because it's the Women's Media Center, but for lack of a better term, the Progressive Women Voices campaign. And are you familiar with the Women's Media Center?
It's a wonderful group,
Great group. And so I was been involved for a year with them and had a great opportunity, even as a journalist, to become better versed at messaging. And I've been doing some writing. I've posted some things on their blog, and the American Journal of Nursing I write for their blog. And just in September launched a new project with Diana Mason, Dr. Mason, who's a Rudin chair, has the Rudin Professor Chair at Hunter College, CUNY, and we are starting the Center for Media, Health, and Policy. We've started it actually in September.
Great. Isn't that terrific? So where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Lower East Side.
What made you into this? What led you into this direction?
Well, two things. One, my parents were very active Democrats. I was raised to be a community activist. Really, blessings to my parents, who are both still alive and still active in their community.
That's wonderful.
And I was raised around a dinner table where, during those days, there were 5 newspapers delivered to our home every day. So civics was discussed, politics was discussed, and there was no question that I was going to be engaged in community. And I'll tell you how I got into journalism. When I was about 13, something happened in my neighborhood that was reported in the Long Island Press, and it wasn't what happened.
Oh, that's so interesting, because that happens, unfortunately, too often.
And I was really, it was a very pivotal moment about press and media. Now, I know stories get told and then they're corrected, but as a young, budding activist, this really upset me that this wasn't the whole story, and it wasn't framed the way it happened. And it was the beginning of being more interested in media, and certainly being my generation and wanting to be engaged in all generations. Media is such an influence in all of our lives. So
where did the nursing come in?
Well, I also was very interested in healthcare, and knew that nursing was the field in healthcare that would allow me to be with people and with them in their illness. Not necessarily be involved in the curing of their illness, but what nursing does is actually be with people with their illness. And it was for my personality and my interest in being with people in their culture, their family, their community, worked best for me.
It's so wonderful. Nurses are absolutely marvelous. I mean, they are the mainstay, I think, as far as I'm concerned, of if you're really seriously ill in someplace in need. Now, your activism has now taken you abroad.
Yes.
And enlarged the scope of your concerns, although public health, I mean, embraces many things.
Yes.
So Let's talk about the latest project.
Well, I have had the privilege of being involved with Project Kesher, which is a Jewish women's activist and advocacy organization. It's in its 20th year. At the fall of Perestroika, when many Jews were leaving Russia and, well, then the Soviet Union, there were our social worker activist founder, Sally Gratch, went there. Actually, she was on a peace march and an anti-nuclear march, and discovered that, in fact, there were many Jews who stayed behind. And she and her husband got a Fulbright. Her husband got a Fulbright. She moved to Kyiv in Ukraine, and that's sort of the early, very brief story. We are now in 160 communities in Belarus, Ukraine, Russia, Georgia, and Kazakhstan. We are a Jewish organization, but we have many women engaged in our work in advocacy and anti-hate work, domestic violence education and stopping domestic violence, as well as human trafficking. And we're just launching a health curriculum, which I'm pleased to be working on, and I'll be going to Moscow in 2 weeks to help teach the teachers who are not health professionals, who are going into community and helping people learn self-care and nutrition and all the things that we all need to do. You know, healing really happens at home. You know that, don't you, Ronnie? We really mostly take care of ourselves. And so to empower women who take care of their families and then take care of their community is the biggest way that we can progressively move healthcare agenda worldwide.
What is healthcare like in Russia and the different communities? What do you call those communities? What is it called? CI?
Well, it was referred to as the CIS originally, which was the Commonwealth of Independent States. That is no longer how the individual countries wish to be referred to. They want to be called by their country name. So that's why we work in Ukraine, Russia, Belarus. It's confusing. It was called the former Soviet Union, but as you can see, as democratization moves forward, people want to not be referred to as being part of the Soviet world.
I remember when I was a young mother, and in the park there were a group of Russian women with their kids. Their husbands worked at the Russian delegation in New York. And we had such an interesting time comparing stories about the caring of infants and stuff like that. What is health? And they also told me that most of the doctors seem to be women.
Yes. Well, there are many women.
Because it was lower paying or some such thing. We're into it. But you're also working in human trafficking, and I'd really like to talk about that.
Sure. I'll just briefly mention that, sadly, healthcare in Russia is, I'll speak about Russia, but it's true in the other countries. The safety net of communism, for better or worse, has been really broken down, and access to care is now becoming more privatized. And there aren't enough nurses there, although there are many nurse colleges here in the United States that are working on developing nursing as a profession in Russia. And I must tell you that all over the world, 80% of care is provided by nursing. Nursing provides most primary care all over the world. And so the life expectancy of men in Russia is 57. For women, it's 61, 62. The birth rate is down. There were many issues around the building up of the communities that are being slowly addressed. But it's why our program and Project Kesher is now committing to a health curriculum. Our women are asking for it. There's a rise, breast cancer rise, Chernobyl and the aftermath of the radiation in Belarus. So, like many places in the world, health is a concern that must be addressed. And how that relates to the human trafficking piece, I think, is that when there are strong families, strong communities, and women are empowered, many things happen, Ronnie, and our network of women through these 160 organized women's groups address human trafficking. And it's interesting how, if I may share with you how we got involved in trafficking.
Please.
Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times has been covering this issue, and back in the early 90s, one of his first columns, our executive director, Karen Gershon, here in North America and the U.S. in Chicago, read the column and called Svetlana Yakomenko, our executive director in Moscow, when there were no cell phones, and it was at the arranged time in the post office, and a crackly line, and said, do you know about human trafficking going on? Because it's stated in this article that many of the women are being trafficked out of the former Soviet Union states. she said, we don't have a word in Russian for trafficking and human trafficking. And she said, I'll start calling. And she called around to a number of our women's groups, and for 6 months, no one had heard anything about this until she called one of our groups in Siberia at the time, and the woman gasped and said, we're missing 6 of our young high school students, and this must be why. We have not heard from them. And we work in collaboration with the Angel Coalition, another organization that's strictly focused on trafficking. But we do what you were telling me, your organization on domestic violence. We educate people in the communities. We tell them that if they're young, look, in all vulnerable populations, there would be no trafficking if there weren't criminals. Let's be very clear.
It's a very correlated.
Yes. And vulnerable populations all want to make better lives. You know, both my grandparents, both my grandmothers left Ukraine and Poland by themselves at a very early age. So I relate to this issue very personally. You know, there was trafficking back then. It wasn't necessarily called trafficking, but when immigrant women and men arrived in the docks after Ellis Island, all kinds of terrible things happened.
And then landed up working in servitude, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so we have a history, and there are more people enslaved today than ever in the history of the world.
More crime, isn't it? And more big crime.
More big crime. It's the 3rd largest criminal activity in the world after drugs and guns, and it's shared with guns.
So are these women, there was a story in the paper about young prostitutes, runaways, who then are befriended by a young man who then loves them and everything, and then starts with their prostitution rings. Are these women kidnapped, or are they enticed?
I think both is happening. I think manipulation, as you mentioned, and I also must tell you that there's trafficking here in the United States. The numbers are 15,000 to 18,000 a year are trafficked both into the U.S., mainly through JFK, Newark, mainly those 2 airports, and then trafficked throughout the United States. It's not only sex trafficking. I also must say, before I answer your question, labor trafficking is very high, and those are vulnerable people, again, who are trying to make better lives for themselves. Many people come into the United States and are trafficked outside of other countries to every country in the world, trying to send money home to their families, their parents, their siblings. The manipulation is key. We have all kinds of stories. I can tell you briefly that the last time I was in Ukraine, a school principal told me that of a high school, that a woman came dressed like you and I, beautifully dressed, well-attended, well-versed, sat with her and talked to her about opportunities for her young high school graduates going abroad to learn English and then be enrolled in university. Before the end of the conversation, she said, and I'm particularly interested in your young, attractive women. And our principal, who's part of Project Kesher, said, why is that? And what is this really about? And a little bit more dialogue, she said, I'm calling the police. And the woman said, whatever you say, I will deny. And she got up with her fancy attaché case and left. So they show up at high school fairs. They do approach young women and say, you can be an au pair, a model, you can work in a restaurant. For labor trafficking, you know, people both wish to be smuggled into other countries, and then it becomes a servitude situation. What I'm doing as a result of my work with Project Kesher, having worked there for a number of years on prevention, I recognize that as a nurse, and nurses there are 2.5 million nurses in the United States, and there are 15 million of us worldwide. And we're in the community, and we're frontline. So I'm on a mission to educate nurses about trafficking, how they can prevent it by educating families about it, how they can advocate for stronger legislation and enforcement of legislation in the countries they live and work in. And then, of course, in the rare instance where someone may come into a health situation, they can identify that victim and help get them into a safe situation.
You're making me want to be a nurse, but anyway.
I'll make you an honorary nurse today, Ronnie.
It's very connected, though, to really large crime families and to drug smuggling and stuff like that, right?
It's also become a security issue. I just want to add that Homeland Security in the United States is now involved. Certainly immigration, the Department of State and the Immigration Department are aware that where these billions of dollars, and their estimates of $8 to $10 billion a year being made on trafficking, where is that money going, and is it being funneled into terrorist activities? I say that with just beginning to see that Homeland Security's concerns around human trafficking, in addition to, of course, it's a human rights tragedy, it's wrong, it must stop, but recognizing that drug money, gun money, and trafficking money is being spent.
The trafficking is in the Far East?
It's everywhere. There's not one country.
I was going to say, but in Africa you also have the total violence. I mean, is it different, or is there trafficking out of Africa also?
Yes, there is. There's trafficking.
But also the rape and the connection, political uprisings and the mistreatment and violence against women is astonishing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
You wrote a piece, was it on the Media Center
Yes, it was.
About going to an African city, actually,
yes.
right? And it's interesting because we're now seeing more and more emphasis on urban cities, urban communities in the world. And so our vision of a city in Africa is not New York City, but it's a city, right?
Yes.
And the conditions are horrible.
Well, you know, there's violence against women all over the world, and some countries are facing more violence than others, and certainly we know in the Congo and in war-torn countries, rape as an act of violence in war is very serious. And our Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, as you are made aware that you know, was in Africa shortly after I was there, and that's when I wrote this piece for the Women's Media Center. I went to Africa to visit Nancy Caballas, who is a nurse colleague who works on gender violence for the State Department and works at in Nairobi. And while I was there, she's doing just incredible work. She was a state trooper in Connecticut and a nurse and a specialist in sex crimes, and retired from Connecticut State Trooper and took this position where she's addressing from a clinical perspective and evaluation, examination, DNA collection. There's no forensics currently in Kenya, as well as the rape laws there, which were only written into law in 2006 as a crime. And as you mentioned, following the election last year, there was terrible violence and gender violence, women's violence, and murder. There were like 1,500 people killed in a week after the election. While I was there following her, tracking her as a journalist and friend and nurse, we went to Kibera, which is one of the largest slums in Africa, and I met with the nurses there who were doing just amazing work, just such amazing work. And I wrote about it because, one, to have the privilege to meet them and see what they're doing and to try and stop this crime, as well as I was in Durban at the International Congress of Nursing, where I spoke about how nurses can be involved in human trafficking. And I want to share one quote from Professor Ware, who was from Kenya, an elder wisdom woman who also was a deputy health commissioner in Kenya at one time. And I asked her, why is there so much violence against women in Africa? And she said, our men need healing, both in the diaspora and here on the mainland, in the continent. There has been terrible violence against our men. And until we heal together, this violence won't stop. And as a feminist, it was very an important thing for me to hear. And yes, we all need healing, and this violence must stop, and war must stop, and violence is a public health issue as well.
War is unbelievable when we look at it. If you can just remove yourself from the scene and look on it. I mean, all these older people sending all these young people to war and killing innocent people, and also killing it's just amazing to me. I just don't understand what I guess you have to be a historian to go back and study it. What do you have to be to understand why people want war?
Well, it's very confusing to me, and I believe that when you and I have a conversation and when we talk with friends and we travel around the world, no matter who we talk with, does anyone want war?
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think that we have an opportunity to maybe tip that conversation everywhere we go. I know when I travel, it was the first time I was in Africa, and you know, having meals with South Africans, having meals with Kenyans, we all share the same thing. We all want our health. We want our children to be safe. We want a home. We want a job, and we want time to play. We want to be with our friends and enjoy our family and have time off from work.
Where in the world would you find somebody who doesn't want that?
That's true. So
it's very hard.
I think that we have to keep having this conversation that war is not healthy for children and any living thing. Isn't that a quote from the 60s?
Absolutely.
I mean, we're both activists.
I mean, your life
from the 60s.
is so enticing. The stories are wonderful, and your perspective and your energy and all the work you're doing. Can I ask a very personal thing about how do you afford to do all this?
I afford to do all this because I choose to live in Manhattan. I've been here for a very long time. I live in a good apartment with a wonderful husband who also is self-employed. I choose how I spend my money. I get great joy out of doing things that don't cost a lot of money. Right. And I have been fortunate to have a supportive family environment that allows me to do it.
Are you able to get grants and different things like that?
Well, we do. I'm currently being paid for a grant to work on the Project Kesher work, and my work at Hunter is also, we're a not-for-profit center, and we're always trying to raise money. As you know, social activism involves trying to find other people who support what it is that you do, and my life is very full, but I have a very good life, and my activism provides me with tremendous passion and energy to keep going forward. It's
wonderful, and it also it helps you assess your life, because it's an incredible thing to be able to do this kind of thing.
It does.
It's a very satisfying thing, right?
Thank you.
So what do you think is going to happen with all this trafficking? Is it going to be an international, is there a meeting of Interpol or whatever? Do they talk about this too?
They do. And, you know, the United Nations is taking a big leap in this. UN GIFT, GIFT.org, is a very good site to go to if you have an interest in finding out more about this. You know, the United States government, and we're waiting to see the State Department with respectfully that it's a new administration. I do have to say that our previous administration, it was one area that they did some good work in from my political perspective. There was a lot of effort made to make trafficking come on board. President Clinton in 2000 signed the first Trafficking in Persons Act, and we have some very strong people in the State Department. We're waiting to see where their orientation will be. I do know that they are focusing on training immigration offices, and if all of the countries that have the laws enforce them,
if they did it, that sounds kind of familiar to me.
Right.
Listen, we haven't even had time to discuss the health plan or anything else in the world. We're at the end of our program, which is unbelievable. But you know, you have to be an inspiration to people, and I'm so glad to have you. And I hope you'll come back again, and we'll continue our conversation.
It would be my pleasure, and you have been an inspiration in my life. You have. I followed you politically. You often took the side that I supported. So thank you so much.
You. Is there any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore? Please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.